The latest round of Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations kicks off in San Diego next month. It's supposed to be a regional free trade agreement covering the United States, Australia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Peru, Chile and New Zealand. But in fact, it's going much further than trade, with US negotiators pushing issues like foreign investment, monetary policy, labour laws, environment regulation and intellectual property rights. But despite 2 years of formal negotiations, the United States has yet to move on barriers to trade in the dairy market. Well, joining us now, the former trade negotiator and executive director of the New Zealand-United States Council, Stephen Jacobi. Well, Stephen, welcome.
Good to be here.
San Diego. Is that going to be make or break time for this deal?
I don't think we're quite at the make or break stage yet. This is the 13th round of a negotiating process that's gone over, the best part of 2.5 years.
Yeah, the leaders are saying, December, get it done.
They're saying get it done by the end of the year. The negotiators say they're still working to that timetable. I have to tell you, it looks fairly ambitious, the way I see it at the moment. We're getting close to the end, put it that way, and so negotiators have certainly got to redouble their efforts to get a conclusion.
I think most New Zealanders have seen this presented domestically as this is a free trade deal, but the Americans seem to have a quite different view of it as being a much broader deal altogether.
It is a broad agreement.
Why are they pushing so hard on that broad front?
Yeah. Well, firstly, it is more than just a conventional free trade agreement. It's meant to be a free trade agreement for the 21st century. What that means isn't entirely clear, and we won't know really, I suppose, until it's finished. But the reason the Americans are pushing it so strongly is that they quite clearly need to grow their economy. They're in a terrible economic situation. They've got to look to external markets, and they've also rediscovered Asia. And they want to be in on the growth that Asia is now experiencing. And without TPP, they could very well find themselves outside.
But if they sit down and say, OK, we're going to do some things about foreign investment, we're going to do some things about labour law, we're going to do some things about environmental regulation, might level the playing field up. I mean, is this done for American domestic purposes to sort of soften the blow, saying, and by the way, you farmers are going to get some competition?
Well, I think the certainly increased competition for agriculture in the United States is a part of it. And what the administration needs is a much broader agreement that they can point to, benefits across a wide range of areas, I suppose, as you say, to soften the blow. But that's kind of looking at the glass half empty. If you look at the glass half full, it's about saying to American agriculture, there are opportunities for you in this wider Asian region if we can get trade barriers down. And part of that means we have to open up our own market. So there's a lot of positives in this for American farmers, just as there is for New Zealand farmers. Actually, it could mean more competition for us in those markets, but we're not afraid of competition in New Zealand.
Looking at it a little cynically, maybe, it is presidential election time. It's a hell of a time to be trying to actually get a free trade deal accepted in the United States, isn't it?
Well, we just had 3 major trade deals be passed by the Congress after quite a gap. These are the big ones with Korea, Panama and Colombia. So the environment on trade in the United States is never good. And not good in a presidential election year, I guess. But bear in mind this, this is the only trade negotiating initiative that President Obama has. And at a time when America needs jobs, needs growth, there is a message you can sell about this. The reality is, of course, that we're going to have to wait until the American election is over before this agreement gets presented in the Congress. Okay,
I mean, your council's been told by one of your American business contacts that there's a real chasm between the negotiators and the political ambitions for the trade deal. Do you share that view?
Well, I think that is actually true. The rhetoric doesn't quite meet the reality.
So it's you just describe for me what this chasm is. Chasm sounds pretty
chasm sounds deep and wide. Hopefully it can be bridged. But the gap, I suppose, that I would describe it is that on the one hand, American politicians in particular are talking about a 21st century agreement with a broad sweep of initiatives and high-level ambition. When it comes to the negotiating table, what we're seeing is not quite initiatives that meet that objective, particularly in the area of market access for agricultural products, which of course is a 20th century issue.
I was going to say, but you've said the Americans must address the dairy market access question to achieve a deal. Do they see it the same way?
I think the negotiators in their heart of hearts see that they must. Whether the politicians see it in quite the same way. I mean, the reality is, why is this important? Because it's a litmus test of how ambitious the United States is going to be. If they can't liberalise agriculture, how can they expect other people to move on areas of interest to them?
Okay. Has the US put anything on the table in regard to dairy market access?
Tim Grosser says that they have not yet tabled what he would regard as a comprehensive market access proposal. So from this we take that they have discussed the issue of agriculture market access liberalisation, but they haven't put the piece of paper on the table that will meet the high level of ambition which has been set out in the vision for this agreement.
Essentially, this is a situation in which the US wants to promote this deal because it wants to counterbalance the influence of China in the Asia-Pacific region. Fair comment?
I think it's completely unrealistic to think you can use an instrument like TPP to counterbalance China. I just don't think that's where the reality of this negotiation is at all, for a simple reason. Because TPP is meant to be a pathway to a broader agreement in the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific, and quite clearly China has to be in that. We couldn't have that sort of arrangement in the Asia-Pacific region without China.
Well, why aren't they at the table? I mean, they're not sitting idle on the trade front. They're talking to Japan, they're talking to Korea, to other absentees, I think.
Yes, for the time being, the Chinese seem to want to prefer an Asian-centric model of trade liberalisation. Of course, we've got a very good trade agreement with us, so we're smiling about that. But they're not disinterested in TPP. They are observing it. Tim Grosser has said that is the case. The Chinese embassy said so this week in a media interview. Why have they not joined at this point? Because they want to see how this thing evolves, and we have to build it carefully.
They say, however, it's ironic that they're not there. This is what the embassy in Wellington said last weekend. It's ironic that we're not there. It would be incomplete with the exclusion of China.
Look, we can complete TPP amongst the 9, but for it to be meaningful, it must be amongst the 21 in APEC, and that includes China. Of course, when TPP started, anybody could come. Literally, it was an open invitation. Some came, others didn't. We need to get on with the business amongst the 9 for the time being, but as I say, build it in a way that China can join in the future. I think that's clearly in New Zealand's interest.
Finally, I think it's accepted generally that we've got a real first mover advantage with China. Are we putting that at risk by pushing it through with the TPP?
Not at all, not at all. We can do both at the same time. We should do both at the same time. We've got an enormous benefit out of this FTA with China, a deepening relation with China, which is beneficial for us both. We want to expand that and make sure that we have the open environment in the Asia-Pacific region as a whole, which is what TPP over time can hopefully deliver.
Stephen Jacobi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stephen Jacobi, Executive Director of the New Zealand-United States Council. Well, after the break, biofuels. Can they become another cash crop for farm foresters?